Welcome to Concussion Talk Podcast. I'm Nick Mercer. This is day 33 of my bike trip across Canada. Day 33, Rossport to White Lake, 161.54 kilometers. Biking time, 6 hours, 32 minutes, 3,505.9 kilometers total. We got moving 30 minutes earlier than yesterday. We bought the day's food at Terrace Bay by 11:30 a.m. Getting to Terrace Bay wasn't the easiest of rides, but all the climbs were followed by long downhills. Are there big hills going that way? I asked the lady at the grocery store in Terrace Bay, pointing to where we were heading. No, not for a while. I'm fairly certain that she wasn't a cyclist. Terrace Bay to Marathon is littered with long, tedious climbs. We stopped in Marathon at about 4:30 for a snack, but not before running into Jordy and Graham from Vancouver, who are also doing the cross-country thing and expect to be finished at the end of September. I gave them my email address and phone number in St. John's and told them to give me a shout if they needed a place to crash. But Mom and Dad may have something to say about that. Either way, I doubt I'll hear from them. After a marathon, it was actually pretty flat. Maybe the lady at Terrace Bay didn't know what town she was in. Kinger and I figured this is one of our 5 toughest days yet, and out of those 5, easily the longest. A bit shorter ride tomorrow, and we'll see if we can get to camp before 8 p.m. This quote-unquote resort sucks. Looking back 10 years later, toughest and crappiest are not interchangeable, or July 2nd would have won that contest. 3 or 4 of those days must have been in the Rockies, but this day was a tough one. The day from Donald to Lake Louise was brutal, but we weren't as fit then and we weren't as comfortable on our bikes. This day probably seemed tough because of its recency. It's all relative. Still, Donald to Lake Louise will stick with me as the toughest. The campground/resort was directly on the side of the highway, and the ground was really hard with small jagged rocks. Not a good night's sleep. Thank you for listening. Please check out my website at www.concussiontalk.com, where you can read my blogs, listen to my Concussion Talk podcast, and Phoenix Concussion Recovery podcast. Thanks again. I'll be listening next week. As always, music at the beginning of this show is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.